The 6th of April, 1941, Belgrade. Without any declaration of war, German bombers appear over the Yugoslav capital in wave after wave. Within days, much of the old city lies in ruins, with thousands of its people dead. At the same time, German forces and their Axis allies invade Yugoslavia from several directions. The Royal Yugoslav Army, weakened by political divisions and national tensions inside the kingdom, begins to collapse. After only 11 days, Yugoslavia surrenders on the 17th of April and is divided among the occupiers. In Croatia and Bosnia, the Axis powers create the Independent State of Croatia and place it under the control of the fascist Ustaše movement. The new regime immediately begins a campaign of violence against Serbs, Jews, Romani people, political opponents, and others it defines as enemies. 4 years later, as Nazi Germany collapses, the army of that state retreats northwest, joined by large numbers of civilians who fear the advancing Yugoslav Partisans. They cross into Austria, hoping to surrender to the British. Instead, the British forces send many of them back into Yugoslav hands. For some, this means imprisonment and forced marches. For many others, it means execution without trial. These events will become known as the Bleiburg repatriations and will cost the lives of tens of thousands of Nazi collaborators from the Balkans. To understand what happened in Bleiburg, it is necessary to go back to April 1941, when Germany and Italy invaded the Kingdom of Yugoslavia and carved it up. In the territory of Croatia and occupied Bosnia, they installed the Independent State of Croatia, a puppet regime run by the fascist Ustaše movement under Ante Pavelić. The new state set about the systematic destruction of those it deemed enemies, carrying out the genocide of Serbs, Jews, and the Roma. At its largest concentration camp, Jasenovac, they killed at least 80,000 people. In neighboring Slovenia, an anti-communist militia, the Slovene Home Guard, took an oath to fight alongside the SS, the Nazi paramilitary organization. Meanwhile, across the country, Serb Chetniks waged their own campaigns between resistance, collaboration, and ethnic killing. All of these groups, which were often at conflict with one another, nevertheless had one common enemy: groups of communist partisans led by Josip Broz Tito. By the end of the Second World War, this movement numbered around 800,000 soldiers and was recognized by the Allies as their ally. The war in the Balkans was brutal, and the men who collaborated with Nazi Germany had good reason to fear what the victorious partisans would do to them, so they decided to try their luck in neighboring countries. As the partisan armies closed in, the Croatian government decided on the 3rd of May 1945 to abandon the country and retreat to Austria, ordering its forces to surrender to the British rather than to the partisans. The Axis-aligned Slovene leadership gave the same order. When Germany was collapsing in the last days of war, Pavelić, leader of the Ustaše, told his troops not to lay down their arms where they stood, but to fight their way north to Austria. Pavelić himself and most of the Ustaše leadership did not go with their soldiers, and they slipped away through Austria westward, escaping the channels that would carry many of them, with help from the Catholic Church, to Spain and Latin America. Heading for Austria were several different columns mixed with civilian refugees, the Croatian armed forces, the Slovene Home Guard, the Montenegrin and Serb units, German troops, and a vast tail of civilians, fighting through partisan blockades across Slovenia toward Carinthia, the southern Austrian province. The main Croatian column reached the fields outside the Austrian town of Bleiburg on the 14th and 15th of May. Its leading section alone numbered perhaps 25 to 30,000 people, with as many as 175,000 more strung out behind it on Yugoslav soil. The British headquarters in the town belonged to the 38th Irish Brigade, part of the 5th Corps under General Charles Keatley, within the Allied forces commanded by Field Marshal Harold Alexander. Negotiations between representatives of the Croatian armed forces, the Tito's Yugoslav army, and the British were held on the 15th of May in the Bleiburg castle. Despite the negotiations, during which the partisan commander, Milan Basta, assured the British that the prisoners would be treated humanely, and that only political criminals would be tried by courts, everything was decided elsewhere. A few days earlier, in Klagenfurt, the capital of the Austrian province of Carinthia, Keatley had met Harold Macmillan, the British minister-resident at Allied headquarters, and out of that meeting came the policy of handing the Yugoslavs, like the Cossacks, over to the forces waiting for them. The reasoning was partly practical. The British could not feed or guard hundreds of thousands of prisoners, and partly political. They were in a tense standoff with Tito, whose troops had occupied southern Carinthia and claimed it, and the city of Trieste for Yugoslavia. London wanted the Yugoslav Partisans out of Austria and was not prepared to fight them over the fate of a defeated enemy army. The orders that came down the chain were confused and at times contradictory. One staff officer directed that all Yugoslav nationals be handed to Tito's forces and not to be told where they were going, while a signal from the Field Marshal Alexander's own headquarters at one point ordered them evacuated to Italy instead. The men on the spot acted on the former order and refused to accept the surrender and directed the column to give itself up to the Yugoslavs. In the days that followed, the British handed over not only the men in Bleiburg, but tens of thousands more held in camps around Klagenfurt, above all at the displaced persons camp in Viktring, which is today part of the city of Klagenfurt. The prisoners were disarmed and, on orders that they not be told where they were going, loaded onto trains and told they were being taken to Italy. They were then taken instead to the Yugoslav border. Some British and American officers objected, and the American political advisor protested a violation of agreed policy, and Alexander himself warned his superiors that to send the prisoners home might be fatal to their health. The repatriations went ahead regardless, and were only halted on the 31st of May, after the head of the Viktring camp and the local British Red Cross intervened, and reports of massacres had begun to filter back across the frontier. Bleiburg was not an isolated act. Under the same Allied repatriation policy, the British handed tens of thousands of Cossacks who had fought for Germany back to the Soviet Union from camps further north near the town of Lienz, in the Austrian part of Tyrol, where some chose to die rather than be returned. Whether a massacre took place on the Bleiburg field itself has long been disputed. Emigre accounts later spoke of machine guns turned on the crowd there, but historians conclude that there was only a brief partisan attack on the column with some deaths. The image of a great slaughter on the field was later exaggerated by Ustaše exiles, and the real mass killing came afterward, deeper inside Yugoslavia. The surrendered prisoners were formed into columns and marched back the way they had come. Near the border, under British eyes, the treatment was correct, but as the columns moved away it collapsed into violence and mass slaughter. Men were given no food or water. They were robbed of anything of value, and anyone who fell behind or stepped aside to drink was shot. Bodies were soon floating in the river Drava, and once they reached transit camps, the prisoners were sorted by unit and year of conscription, and from there the killing was done in earnest, carried out, among others, by Tito's communist secret police. The largest single grave was at Tesno, near the city of Maribor, in today's Slovenia, where prisoners were brought to a long anti-tank trench, their hands bound with wire, and shot in batches over several days. The trench is thought to hold around 15,000 bodies, and was found by accident in 1999 during the building of a motorway. The Slovene Home Guardsmen taken from Vitring were driven to Kočevski Rog, a forested region in southern Slovenia, and thrown into its deep cast pits, many still alive. There were other killing fields at Macelj, in today's Croatia, at Bukovžlak, near the Slovenian city of Celje, and at the abandoned coal mine in Hudayama, where the dead were walled up underground and not discovered until 2009. How many died has never been established, and probably never will be. The records were destroyed or sealed, and for decades the subject could not be spoken of at all. The numbers have been fought over ever since, inflated by Croatian ultra-nationalist and émigré writers, who have claimed figures of several 100,000, and suppressed or minimized by the communist state, which treated the whole matter as taboo until the 1980s. Recent research suggests that around 60 to 70,000 people were killed in the aftermath, most of them Croats, but also roughly 10 to 12,000 Slovene Home Guardsmen, along with several thousand Serbs and Montenegrins. The memory of Bleiburg has proved almost as contested as the figures. Under Tito's dictatorship, it was a forbidden subject, but after the breakup of Yugoslavia, it became the focus of a large annual commemoration on the field near the town, supported by the Croatian state and the Catholic Church. But the gatherings drew crowds displaying fascist Ustaše insignia and slogans, turning a memorial for the dead into a stage for the rehabilitation of the murderous and barbaric regime that had helped cause their deaths, until the Austrian authorities and the local diocese moved to restrict and finally withdraw from the event. What happened after Bleiburg holds two truths that its advocates on either side have always found hard to hold together. The columns that came to the field were not innocent. They were units and soldiers that had murdered Serbs, Jews, Romani people, and other civilians by the tens of thousands, and men who had sworn loyalty to the SS, and their leaders had used the civilians among them as a shield while escaping themselves. And yet, the killing that followed the surrender was not justice, but mass murder. Prisoners and refugees, conscripts who had never chosen the cause, were marched back and shot in trenches and thrown down mine shafts without trial. In numbers, no court ever counted.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.